For joining Indivisible 1431's candidate check-in tonight. We are awaiting some candidates. We have Javi Andrade, candidate for House District 19 on board here, and Milah Flores, candidate for Congressional District 17. We're waiting on two more people, Jay Gordon Mitchell and Casey Shepard. So we'll give them a few minutes. Thank you all for joining in. In the meantime, I'm going to do a little screen sharing, just give you a preview. So first off, welcome. This is our penultimate, as they might say, next to last candidate check-in. Everyone will be muted, and we appreciate your patience. Just to kind of run over things, we have questions for the congressional candidates and for our state candidate, Javi Andrade, in a poll that we'll put out. It's a little complicated. It's not working as well as I think it should. So it's a hardship for you all. We have questions for congressional candidates that are prefaced by the letter F. I think there's 6 of them. So these are F1, F2, etc. And then for the state questions, slightly different questions, slightly different, content and powers in the office. And those are S1, S2, S3, and so on. I think there's S6. So if everyone could pick up to 2 F questions and another 2 S questions, and that's where you'll have a problem because despite setting the survey to multiple choice, it refuses to accept more than one answer. So I believe what one must do is either hit the back button after you do your first submission to make a second. And I apologize for the problem. Kay, is that the correct explanation I'm giving folks?
Yeah, Mike, that was a great explanation. And if you guys will look in the chat, we put the QR code there. And I find it much easier to use my phone, and you can just scan that QR code. It'll take you directly to the poll. You can close it down and then scan it again to get back into the poll for your second, third, and fourth selections. If you have any questions, shoot them to me in the chat, and I will try to address them as the meeting goes on. And we do apologize for the technical difficulty.
Thank you, Kay. Appreciate that. And yeah, everyone, please use our chat for comments about the meeting or any of our initiatives. And also, we will put out links and other information as required. So the process today will be that I will briefly introduce all candidates, and then each will immediately make a 7-minute statement. They'll speak in ballot order. And following everyone's statement, I'll read the top questions to every candidate. And each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. So hopefully that's pretty clear. We have an excellent lineup today. Our candidates for Congressional District 17 are Milah Flores, Jay Gordon Mitchell, and Casey Shepard. And as I mentioned, Javi Andrade is running for House District 19. I'll just give you a brief explanation. We had aimed to include only contested races towards the primary in this project, just because of lack of bandwidth for much more. And Javi Andrade was running, and he had an opponent, but the opponent dropped out. So we're still going to hear from Javi, and look forward to that message. So, okay, how many people do we have out here now? And I think, do we have any more candidates, Kay?
I am not seeing Jay Gordon Mitchell on the list.
Is Casey here? I don't see Casey either. Well, okay. Be that as it may, I'm sure they'll delay it and they'll come back up. So, Milah Flores, thank you for joining us. You are first person.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and speak with y'all today. So just a little introduction. My name, it's Milah. It's pronounced Milah Flores. Yes, it's a different one. It's a little bit different. But my name is Milah Flores. I am so excited to be running for Congressional District 17, and it's been so exciting to see all of the early voting that everybody's doing. So if you voted, I want to thank you. Like, people are showing up in troves, so it's been really exciting to see. So with that being said, just a little introduction about myself. I'm 39-year-old mom. We are a blended family. We have 5 children. We have 4 at home with us, and they are ages 17, 15, 13, and 9. My husband and I moved here. We bought our home here in 2021 as my husband was nearing retirement out of the Army. He served 22 years in the Army. He joined July 2001 and right before September 11th, and ended up deploying 6 times, with 4 of those being combat deployments. So we've been kind of all over the world. We actually retired out of Germany, and out of anywhere in the United States we could have chose to live, we decided to live in Texas. Not only for the great programs that they had for veterans there, such as helping out with property taxes for disabled veterans, to even educations. My daughter really wanted to go to the STEM program for high school through SFA. So we found a perfect home and we moved here. Now, while my husband had retired and we had moved here, I was still working for the government. I worked for the United States Army for several years. And then as my husband and I were getting back into Texas, settling our family here, at that point, I transitioned over from the Army to the Air Force as a civilian. I never was a green suiter, but I was a civilian, from the Army over to the Air Force. In the Air Force, I deployed October 7th, 2023, over to the Middle East and was there for about 3 months, and then transferred directly to the Space Force. And I worked as an executive assistant for a Space Force commander for about a year. And then I resigned the day after Donald Trump was elected. So this is kind of where the story starts as to why I'm doing this. As I came home, I took a job as a nonprofit worker getting homeless veterans off the street. So immediately I started seeing the military bubble that my family had been in, going from duty station to duty station, my husband deploying, me working for the government, our kids going to government schools. We're now just normal civilians. And I take this job where we're dealing with dozens and dozens of homeless veterans every month. And then schools, putting my kids into the public school systems outside of the military for the first time. My son's elementary school got shut down the second year we were here. We heard about other rural schools in areas being shut down. Then we found out how hard it was for my husband to get an actual appointment through the VA. And we'd even moved close to a VA clinic. So all these things started to come together. I started embedding myself in the community. And then Trump's elected, we start seeing things like Doge happen. I had friends who were laid off. We have not enough people answering the phone to even pick up VA hotlines for suicide hotlines because of the funding that's not there. And this is all these things that we have worked for so hard and fought for so hard for our country. And so we're living our life, and I'm like, maybe I could do something small, something maybe local. Well, long story short, the Texas Majority PAC reached out to me and they said, peers from your community have asked if you'd be willing to run for something. I said, absolutely. One interview went to another, and they finally asked, they said, would you be willing to run for Congressional District 17? I thought about it. It took me about one night and I said, absolutely, I can. In the time my husband was deployed and working, I was obtaining my degrees. I have an associate's in business. I have a bachelor's in criminal justice with a focus in human services, and a master's in criminal justice with a focus in homeland security. So I put so much work into my education and into working for the military, and now we're these people here in society. And before that, I had always trusted, before, we are a blended family, but I'd been a single mother before. I had to depend on SNAP. I'd had to depend on Head Start. I'd had to depend on help with affordable housing. And then to come into the community and see that these things weren't happening. And then to come into the community and see people kidnapped off the street. The guy from our corner store was just kidnapped by ICE last weekend here in the little town I live in. So it's starting to hit home more and more. So with the education and the tenacity and the youth and the courage I have to be able and go out and speak, not only as somebody who's worked for the government, but just as a civilian, now, seeing this and living this every day, I have the voice. I have worked up in the government high enough to know how they talk. And I've studied enough to know how Homeland Security works. And I'm living it. I'm a mother. I have daughters who have less rights than I had when I was their age, my 2 teenage daughters. So that's why I'm running. I'm here to make a change. I am proud to be doing this. I'm excited to be doing this. And that is why I'm running. If you guys have any question, I see that there's the poll out there, but any question about policy, I'd be happy to answer anything you guys would like as well. I just wanted you guys to kind of know where I'm coming from and introduce myself that way. So absolutely.
Thank you so much, Milah. Thank you very
Mhm.
much. And
Absolutely.
everyone, please, I hope you can see the poll and please pick your questions. Again, apologies. And thank you. Give everyone a big warm welcome. We have everyone online. And thank you, Milah. We'll come right back to you. And so now I'd like to introduce Jay Gordon Mitchell, who is also a candidate for Congressional District 17. Gordon is an Air Force veteran, a first responder, and twice elected school board member who still enjoys substitute teaching. Hi, Gordon. So tell us why you deserve our vote in 7 minutes or less.
All right. Well, first of all, I apologize. Zoom decided it wanted to update its program before I signed on, so I apologize for being tardy. Let's see here. Let me click this poll out of the way. And all right, there we are. Sorry about that. Yeah, so good evening. My name is Jay Gordon Mitchell. Because this is 1431 and it covers Cedar Park and Leander, you may know me from my former name of Jim McKay, which I'm certainly willing to talk about. I did change my name in 2024. So most of you may already know me, right? People have seen me in the rain. They've seen me at town halls. They've seen me at protests and rallies and No King Day events and local meetings, right? Many of you know my resolve and my willingness to do the hard things and also have uncomfortable conversations. What I've run this campaign on is that I show up, I do the work, and I'm accountable to the people that I serve. More locally to the folks of 1431, I have sat in the seat of accountability while students told their stories of racism and bullying and discrimination. I didn't turn away from that. I didn't minimize it. Because that's what equity work is all about, right? It's about making sure that no child in our community feels unseen in their own school. And it required honesty, it required courage, and it required leaders willing to face the full truth. I stood in the middle of some of the most tumultuous moments in our community's history, and I'm talking about COVID and culture wars, right? But here we are. It's 2026, and we have real problems out there. And so 8 months ago, I decided to run for this seat, and I ran mainly because I have a case pending before the Board of Veteran Appeals, which I had reached out to Pete Sessions' office a number of times and got absolutely no response. And so the last time I called him, I said, "Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run against you, because if you're doing this to me as a veteran, I know you're doing it to others, and I'm going to fix the problem." And so for the last 8 months, I've stayed focused on the real problems, right? And I'm talking about the ICE raids in our communities, our rural hospitals that were closing, public education under attack, working families struggling while corporate profits soar, the social safety net programs being cut while children end up in handcuffs. And I will say that children in handcuffs instead of the people that are putting them in handcuffs, right? And so what are we going to do about this, right? It's easy to stand up here and recite standard answers, right? I bring solutions. And so what I'd like to do is talk about some of the things that I want to do as your next congressperson. And I'll start with the economy, right? We need to introduce legislation lifting the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And then we also need to introduce legislation that closes CEO and corporate tax loopholes, including closing the loopholes that allow CEOs to take out untaxed loans against their stock holdings by treating those proceeds as taxable income. That's how we close those tax loopholes. And then also we need to introduce legislation to break up the monopolies in our food supply. I think that's probably one of the most immediate things that we need to address as Congress. Going back to education, right? We hear a lot of things in Congress about or not in Congress, but in our state about vouchers and the voucher scam. And I've been asked several times, what can you do as a congressperson when we're talking about state voucher programs, right? I think it's fairly simple. We introduced legislation prohibiting federal dollars from funding voucher schemes. We can prohibit the siphoning of federal dollars away from public education and public schools. And then when we look at healthcare, right, we need to address the fact that we have the same corporations that own the hospital, the insurance company, and the pharmaceutical pipelines. And so I'd like to introduce legislation prohibiting insurers from denying physician-directed treatment as well. Housing. I think we need to introduce legislation preventing the conglomerates like BlackRock from buying up entire neighborhoods and driving up rent. Home ownership, it is a pathway to generational stability. And the working class deserves a shot at that stability. And so these are some of the solutions. But I want to go back and address some of the noise that's been out there. And Mike, I appreciate you reaching out and asking me some pointed questions about some anonymous and factually inaccurate information that has suddenly appeared. I left the school board in September of 2021. That is when I resigned. I legally changed my name in January of 2024. And then I decided to run for Congress in late June of 2025. Those three events are not related, and they're not related to why I'm here today. I am proud of my board service, and I am honored to carry now my maternal family's name. I'm proud to be running to build a community where people do not have to sell plasma or work 3 jobs just to survive. When I served on the school board, I fought to create the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Now, the right came in and tried to tie that to CRT and tried to torpedo the entire effort. And so I stood on my conviction that CRT, which is a graduate level framework grounded in legal academia, has no place in public education, especially if we're going to allow the right to appropriate the terms and kill DEI. We needed DEI, and we still need DEI in our public schools. But that whole conversation is well documented, as well as my advocacy for marginalized students, right?
10 seconds.
Yes. And so these positions are not contradictory, they're consistent, right? So what I'd like to ask is, are we going to be a party that builds or a party that squanders this opportunity over sound bites, right? I'm here to do the work. I'm here to go to Washington and hold Republicans accountable for the devastation that they've caused in our community. And so I'm happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much, Gordon. Very appreciate your comments very much. Next is Casey Shepard, also running for Congressional District 17. Casey has practiced law in Central Texas since 2011, focusing on indigent criminal defense. So we'll get Casey up here in just a sec. And please remember to choose your 4 questions, 2 F questions and 2 S questions. Apologize for the difficulties, but Kay's got it worked out really well, where you can just put things into the chat, put the numbers into the chat, and she's keeping score of it, I'm sure.
I am.
Okay. Kay, do we have Casey ready to come up?
Yes, I'm ready.
On Spotlight.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
Hi, Casey. So
Hi.
I introduced her. Please tell us in 7 minutes or less why you'd be a great congressman.
Okay, well, so my name's Casey Shepard. I'm a 7th generation Texan, 3rd generation District 17, actually. And I started doing policy debate in high school, and then got a debate scholarship for college and went to law school out in California. And then, like, as you said, returned in 2011 to focus on indigent criminal defense. My job requires a lot more than simple legal work that a normal attorney would have for a paying client. So, for instance, today there was a gentleman who had received a probation offer, but didn't have a home address, and the judge was reluctant to give it to him. So, in situations like those, I have to help them find housing. And there's a percentage of my work that I would consider social work in a way. I think the reason that I would be a good congressman is that with Trump in the White House and the chances of the Democrats taking 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate, all of these policy objectives that we keep talking about are great. I support all of the Democratic legislative priorities, but the chances of actually getting any of them passed are slim to none. Trump just vetoed a bill for a water pipeline in Colorado simply, and he said because Colorado is a blue state, that's why he didn't want to allow them, I guess, to have water. So I can't make any promises about policy. I'm sorry. I can't make any promises about achieving policy objectives. I think that's for the next 2 years at least. The mission is fighting the Trump administration. So I would say blocking Trump's nominations, launching congressional investigations into Trump programs, which should yield a lot of abuse of power, using the power of the purse to cut funding and otherwise put conditions on organizations like ICE, reaching out to non-governmental organizations, for instance, Democracy Forward or the ACLU, so they can pursue legal action lawsuits against the Trump administration. And I can promise that I would absolutely on day one join the coalition to impeach Kristi Noem, Kash Patel, Pete Hegseth, and others. I would also look at legislative priorities that would essentially lay out for the American people the cruelty of the Republicans these days. So my legislative priorities would be focused on providing people with food, medicine, and housing. Simply because if we get a bill, for instance, to restore and improve SNAP, or the WIC program, or school lunches and school breakfast, if we get those policies passed, that's great. We've achieved something pretty miraculous. But if the Republicans in the Senate or the White House shoot those policies down, it lays out a story for the American people that they can see where the Republicans' priorities really lie, and it's not in taking care of the average American. And telling that story over the next 2 years will basically assure a larger blue wave in 2028, where we can take both the House and Senate and the presidency and actually start rebuilding America that the Trump administration has essentially dropped and broken into pieces. We can start building a better America that works for the average American, that cooperates globally in international organizations, that doesn't spend $1.4 trillion a year on defense while cutting things like SNAP and ACA subsidies and things like that. So my job every day requires me to fight for clients' rights, to reach across the aisle to prosecutors, try to work out the best deals possible for my clients, and on bigger cases, work with other attorneys. Bigger cases any case requires 2 attorneys at least, but taking bigger cases to trial sometimes requires 5 or 6. That's essentially the same set of skills that you would use in Congress. You would reach across the aisle, look for bipartisan solutions to common problems. When those bipartisan solutions aren't there, you advocate for your policy, fight for that. And ultimately, it's about joining and forming coalitions that with a specific aim in mind. And that would be something that I would be very familiar with. And for instance, congressional investigations are conducted much like trials, subpoena power, questioning witnesses, that sort of thing, all of which I'm quite familiar with. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And I guess going back to a question that I didn't answer before, why I decided to run. For a long time, the government respected rights for the most part. And that made my job, I don't want to say easy, but yeah, coming up against a case where someone's rights had been violated was relatively rare. With the Trump administration, I see the rights that I am protecting every day in court, having to protect them every day. But was that time?
Get 10 seconds.
Okay. Seeing the rights violated out on the streets prompted me to look for a new way to protect those rights. And that's by running for Congress.
Thank you very much, Casey. Appreciate the good comments. And now we're going to shift gears and go to Texas House District 19. And the individual who seeks that nomination is Javi Andrade. Excuse me. Javi is a career Army veteran with combat deployments, and he is a computer professional specializing in cybersecurity. So Javi, please talk us about yourself and why you want to be in state legislature in your 7-minute slot, please.
Well, thank you, Mike, for having me here this evening. Really appreciate it. Just a first note is I did have a primary opponent. His name was Kelly Hall. After a little bit of conversation and some time with each other, he decided to drop out and suspend his campaign, and he endorsed me. So it was too late to remove him from the ballot, but he is on the ballot. But if you vote for him, it's going to be a wasted vote because he's not running anymore. I was born and raised in Kerrville, Texas. At 19 years old, I decided to join the Army. I thought I was just going to do a few years in the Army. I ended up doing 21 years, have multiple combat deployments and operational deployments. I started off as an enlisted combat engineer. I commissioned later on in my military career and became a warrant officer. I think some of the highlights of my career are that I got to deploy to North Africa. I built a package called the D-SIPS package when President Bush asked us to take out some Al-Qaeda members. And I had an opportunity to work with a young lieutenant, and he and I built a package called Deployable Communication Package Strategic. We went into Africa and worked with the CIA and took out these high value targets. So that's one of the highlights of my career. Another one is I got an opportunity to work with the SACEUR. And if you don't know about the SACEUR, that's the Supreme Allied Commander Europe. And it's a very prestigious position. It's a 4-star position, and I was assigned to his staff. Every day, I was very, very proud to go into that office because if you sit there and you look at that desk that's in that office, it's Dwight D. Eisenhower's desk. So it's the same desk that he sat at during World War II. So it touched me a lot, proud to be an American, to be sitting in that same historical place and making decisions with those 4 stars that were in there. A lot of experience, a lot of learning, a lot of mentoring took place, which allowed me to grow as a leader. After 20 years, I decided to retire and walk away, decided to go work at the University of Texas in their J.J. Pickle research facility and handled some of their top secret projects. I did leave there after about a year, and I joined the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I handled about 3 portfolios for the Department of Veterans Affairs, enhancing veteran care. I do run a veteran outreach program where I just get up, each day, go to Walmart, buy some clothes, some blankets, some socks, things like that, those basic necessities. And I go out there and I walk the streets and I try to find veterans or just homeless people in general and give it to them. Yeah, I even give them money. You know, some people may question the fact that I give them money, but I give it to them, and it'll be their decision, to do whatever they choose to do with that money. But I also try to use that outreach program to educate them and let them know that there are services out there that can help them. And so that is one thing that I do. After working at the Veterans Affairs for about 2 years, I decided to join the Department of Treasury. And I built a system for the United States government. It was called Trilix NX, and it handles IDS and IPS. And this is one of the reasons why I decided to run as a candidate for House District 19 is after I built that system and Trump got elected, Doge came to me and Elon Musk, and they asked me for access to that system. And I just couldn't see myself giving them access to that system after the years that I had spent in the military fighting for each American. So I chose not to do it. I resigned from my job and I walked away. And I reached out to Congressman McCall because he had sponsored a lot of the cybersecurity bills. So I figured that he would want to know what's going on with our government departments. Well, Mike McCall never answered, never got back to me, didn't care anything about what was going on. So I decided to throw my hat into the race as a candidate. And I decided, you know what, if those officials aren't going to answer and protect Americans, I said, I'm going to do it. I said, I'm going to step up and I'm going to go ahead and run and be a person of integrity, person who's going to really take care of the American people. And so that's why I decided to join the race. I am married. I have a family. My wife was a prosecutor in Williamson County. She's a Baylor Law graduate. She was a prosecutor for about 5 years, and then she decided to go onto private criminal defense. And I have 5 kids. Uh, Two of them played soccer. One played soccer in North Carolina. The other one played soccer in Arizona. And then I have a little 13-year-old that's still at home, my last child that's at home. But my kids have been my pride and joy. I do a lot of these things for them because our kids are our future. And so one of the main things that I'm going to definitely repeal is Greg Abbott's voucher program. I think it definitely hurts our public school education system. And other than that, I'll be available for any questions, but thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Javi. Appreciate it very much. So now we're going to go to the questioning. And first, I've got to figure out what were the most popular.
There was a tie for the federal questions. 1, 5, and 6 got the same amount. So 1, 5, and 6 for the federal questions.
Okay. And 6 was okay, the voting one. All right. Thank you, Kay. And then on the state side, what do we have there? S1 and so on. There we go.
S5 was the top winner, and then S2 came in second place.
All right, so we will cover those right now. And so question 1, as you heard, for the federal questions, those are all ties. So for question 1, we'll go to Gordon Mitchell first. Gordon, this will be on healthcare expansion. Texas remains one of the states with the highest uninsured rates. Do you support a Medicare for all model, or do you believe in expanding the Affordable Care Act and pressuring the state to expand Medicaid is more viable?
So I think both are sound solutions, but what I would want to do is I would want to fight for universal health care, including Medicare and Medicaid for all. And beyond that, though, it's one thing to fight for how are we going to make healthcare more affordable for our working families, but we have to first address putting profits over people's health. We have to address that first. And so we need to break, like I said in my opening, we need to break up these conglomerates that own not only the facility, but then they own the insurance company and they also insure the pharmaceutical pipeline. As long as we allow that institution to remain unchallenged, all of the Medicaid, Medicare for all, and universal healthcare, and all of those solutions will never be as fully effective as they could be, because, and I'll move way over to agriculture as an example. When we talk about supporting our farmers, we provide them with subsidies. Every time we provide a subsidy, John Deere and the other conglomerates on the backside know that that subsidy is coming, and so they simply raise their price, and that subsidy that is supposed to help the farmer ends up being a pass-through to corporate America. And we see the same thing in our healthcare system, and they're equally as troubling. And so the first thing that we have to do is we have to disentangle what healthcare looks like in America. We need to absolutely regulate these industries so that they're not putting profit over care. And we'll take that all the way down to physicians. If the physician says that you need the treatment, there should be no corporate influence that says that we're not going to pay for that. If the doctor says you need it, I want to pass legislation to make sure that that care is provided.
Thank you, Gordon. Okay, the same question to you, Casey. Texas remains one of the states with the highest uninsured rates. Do you support a Medicare for all model, or do you believe that expanding the Affordable Care Act and pressuring the state to expand Medicaid is more viable? 2 minutes, please, Casey. Unmute him here.
Can we get spotlight, please?
Yeah. There, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. 2 minutes.
Yeah, I would push for universal health care, and basically automatically create a public plan and fold the multitude of current plans through the ACA marketplace, Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, and all of those into a universal plan. And in a transition period, I think private insurers could either offer supplemental insurance or just be phased out of the entire process completely. Part of that plan would be to standardize benefits and provider payments, and fund it through normal government funding through taxation. It would create one national benefits package, hospital, mental health, drugs, and it would allow for the bargaining power to bring down cost through hospitals, and the cost of primary care and the cost of drugs. And then financing as it would shift from employers to the government, and they would basically, it would help people start small businesses. It would help people, companies hire more employees if they weren't having to provide health insurance. Taking that burden off and putting it on the government would not only help the government with bargaining power, but it would also help private industry as well. And as far as implementation,
Seconds.
I'm sorry. Okay. You could phase in by age or group, just like we have with the American, the ACA. And coverage can expand in stages. Basically, we can phase the project in, and while with the end goal of getting everyone covered under the same plan. That's it.
Thank you, Casey. And now we're going to shift gears again to state questions. And next up will be Javi. The question for him is on immigration enforcement. Javi, what support should state and local government give to immigration enforcement? And how can state and local government hold ICE accountable for their actions and ensure that ICE treats detainees humanely?
Yeah, so first thing that we would do is definitely hold them accountable. Their actions are just horrible. There's no need for that. I spent time in Iraq, and we had many times where I had to apprehend folks who were coming in through our gate. And even some of the most horrible terrorists who had committed heinous acts, they were treated with more respect than the way that we're treating these immigrants. So first thing is I put a stop to the ICE. If you're going to come into Texas, you're going to remove those masks, you're going to wear body cams, and you're going to act humane. You're going to act the way that anybody who's an official or working in the capacity for the United States government is supposed to be upheld to the utmost respect. And if they want that respect, they need to behave properly and do their job the way it's intended to do. So they'll get no support from Texas in any way if they're operating as an out of control entity. If they do commit a crime or anything like that, they will be held accountable. I'll make sure that the Attorney General, that any of the local prosecuting officials are held accountable if they allow them to walk away without doing anything. So I will pass legislation to make sure that at the end of the day that we're holding ICE accountable. We've had people get deported in the past, and it was never at this type of horrible visions that we're seeing on TV, the murdering of American citizens, the taking of young kids and detaining them in these facilities. These facilities will be shut down. There's no need for these facilities to exist. We can do this in a humane
10
way,
seconds.
and I can tell you that if I'm elected, we are not going to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Javi. And our next question will go back to congressional candidate Milah Flores. Again, it's on healthcare expansion. Milah, Texas remains one of the states with the highest uninsured rates. Do you support a Medicare for all model, or do you believe that expanding the Affordable Care Act and pressuring the state to expand Medicaid is more viable? 2 minutes.
Well, first off, universal healthcare in itself is a human right. We as a right have we're human beings. We should be taken care of. You even think about ancient days, people were taken care of back then. You know, they had special doctors, even in ancient cultures. It was just something that happened. People were taken care of, and we've kind of backslid from that in one way or another. So I would be for expanding Medicaid. For right now, I think we can definitely push for universal health care, but I feel like it may need to be done in steps. So I would support expanding the Affordable Care Act and closing the Medicaid gaps that we currently have in Texas. I'll also add Medicaid is very near and dear to me. I have used it as a single mother, and without it, my kids, who were toddlers at the time, could have gotten sick. And so I do know how important it is for this, but we need to pressure the states to accept full Medicaid expansion funding. That is extremely important. If they were able to do that, it would allow a safety net to be there for children, mothers, families, for now, and then eventually expand more and more up. We need to lower prescription drug costs, and we need to cap life-saving medications such as insulin. It's just absolutely appalling when you hear about how much we pay in the United States. I can't give you flat figures, but I do know in comparison to European countries, we're just paying above and beyond. And this is what keeps people healthy. This is what keeps people alive when they have diabetes. We need to strengthen rural hospitals and community health centers. I know a lot of rural hospitals are closing, but one thing we can really look at is community health centers that do allow at least some type of healthcare to be in these rural communities. And I think as we're doing all this, we continue working towards a universal coverage that guarantees care as a right for every human being in America. So that is what I would do.
Thank you very much, Milah. Appreciate it. That concludes the set of questions 1. So now we'll move into question 2, which I believe the second most popular was on voting. So I'm going to ask you, Casey Shepard, to first field this question. What specific federal measures would you prioritize to combat voter suppression, and how would you ensure that they pass a divided Congress?
The first thing would be to enforce national voting standards, robust federal voting standards, like restoring and improving on the Federal Voting Rights Act, and setting minimal standards for things like ID, registration, polling access, which I know Williamson County is dealing with this voting cycle, and essentially create a floor that states can't drop below, because with an aim to curb targeted closures, for instance, in low-income areas, restrictive voter ID laws like we're seeing develop in Texas, and actually pursue federal enforcement against the states. Also, I would also expand early voting, mail voting, and ultimately online voting. I think that all of those options are not too far out and would be much easier ways to not only conduct the election, but to allow everyone the chance to vote. And the last would be, we've seen a lot of voter purges where they take voter lists and just wipe out thousands of names, many of whom end up being registered live voters. And I would stop that practice and have some sort of federal oversight for states that do those purges, and a system for guaranteeing that those purges are done in a proper and non-discriminatory way.
Thank you very much, Casey. Okay, and next we're going to go back to Javi for some state-related questions. Javi, the question is on school funding. With Texas currently ranking near the bottom in the nation for per pupil funding, how would you ensure that our public schools are fully funded while specifically opposing the diversion of taxpayer dollars to private school vouchers?
That's correct, Mike.
Javi?
If you look at the national average, the national average is each student gets $17,500. Here in Texas, they're only receiving $13,000. That is ridiculous. With us being the second largest GDP in the United States, we should be fully funding our schools and providing more money for our students. There's no reason that we should be near the bottom. That's ridiculous. So the first thing I would go in and repeal the private school voucher system. We all know that this is one of Greg Abbott's buddy systems. That money, 5% of that money, and that's $50 million because it's a $1 billion program. $50 million of that money is going to New York City. That's the company who's running that. Odyssey is the company. And so we're losing $50 million right off the back to an entity that is not even in the state of Texas. So I'm going to go ahead and repeal that. The whole voucher program is going to get scratched, and we're going to start taking care of our kids. Our kids are our future. We've got to educate them. The private schools, they're getting a break. These are some of the wealthiest people in Texas, and they're already getting a break, $10,000 for each of their kid. I was listening to James Tallarico the other night, and he was talking about 8 kids that Elon Musk has. That's $80,000 that he is eligible to receive. The richest man in the world can get $80,000, but yet the family who is struggling, that's barely making ends meet, cannot catch a break. And so we have got to turn around, start fighting for our families and our communities. And that's going to be one of the first things that I do is repeal this voucher program, start taking care of our families. Because like I said, we have a surplus, a $30 billion surplus. There's no excuse that we can't fully fund our education. Thank you.
Thank you, Javi. And returning back to federal questions, I will turn to Milah. And the question again is voting. Milah, what specific federal measures would you prioritize to combat voter suppression? And how would you ensure that they pass a divided Congress?
Yes, absolutely. So one key part of legislation that is currently trying to be passed and that has been um, put out as of 2025, and that's the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And what that would do is it would restore those protections that we originally had in the 1956 Voting Rights Act, and those are extremely important. We do know that the House just passed the SAFE Act. As a woman, as an adopted woman, there are issues with this for me. They're saying that it's pretty much a poll tax is what I would say. There, you have to have some type of ID that you would have to pay for. A lot of people don't have their birth certificates. Women would need to bring their birth certificates if they ever change their name. I don't know how it works if somebody had changed their name specifically, but a woman would have to take, if she'd been married, would have to take her birth certificate in there for that. And that is definitely not something we want. We do not want it to be harder for people to vote. The second thing would be to establish national standards for early voting and mail-in voting. If national standards were set, the states couldn't change them or be forced by the regime or any regime to have to make those laws um, on their own to benefit the administration. The second thing, or the third thing, would be to implement automatic voter registration nationwide. That should just be something we have. As soon as boys turn 18, they immediately have to sign up for selective service. It could just be something like that. From the time you turn 18 years old, you're registered to vote, or you at least have to make an effort in some smaller way than how hard it is for us now. And I would also build bipartisan coalitions around election security and voter access. I do believe bipartisanship is what may be something that will save us if we're able to reach across the aisle and be able to talk to those on the other side to work with us. So that is my answer.
Thank you very much, Milah.
Mhm.
And now to you, Gordon, same question on voting. What specific federal measures would you prioritize to combat voter suppression, and how would you ensure that they pass a divided Congress? 2 minutes, please.
And so the first thing I would say is I would be strongly opposed to any federal government agency or administration that demands voter rolls from the state. We have got to put a stop to that immediately, right? But when we're talking about voting rights, that is in Congress's lane. That is their lane. Article 1, Section 4, right? And then we think back to what was it, Shelby County versus Holder, I think it was in 2013, right? The federal pre-clearance protections were gutted. And so just like we saw with the fall of Roe v. Wade, we have got to reestablish our pre-clearance protections for voting rights, and then we need to codify that in the Constitution. We have got to make sure that we cannot use voting laws to silence voices. We need a national minimum standard, a floor, not a ceiling, right? Reasonable early voting access is what I'm talking about. Fair voter roll maintenance, ballot curing, all of the protections against voter intimidation. And then we also have to protect election workers, and we have to fund the enforcement of voter protection laws. So to Milah's point, right, it will take bipartisan cooperation. And we do that by presenting this as it's not a left versus right issue. When you limit voters' access to the polls, you affect all people regardless of their party affiliation, right? So I don't think there's a lot of horse trading that has to take place there. I think it is a problem whose time has come, and I think you'll find broad support on both sides of the aisle.
Thank you very much, Gordon. And that concludes our first two rounds of questions. So we'll turn to a third question, beginning with Javi. And Javi, your question will be on climate resilience and the energy grid. Texas faces increasingly extreme weather and a surge in energy demand from industries like data centers. How can we modernize the ERCOT grid and protect the growth of Texas's solar and wind industries? 2 minutes, please, sir.
Yeah, so this is a tough one right here, and this is because the House District 19 is so large, it covers 5 counties. And what I'm finding out as I get out there and I campaign is that I notice a lot of people in the West Travis County area and even into the Burnett area are all about more solar power and things of that nature. But when you get down to the Gillespie County and Harper, Fredericksburg, they don't want it. And so they have dug in their heels and they want to fight it. So this is that tough balancing act that I've got to figure out how can I convince them that this is good, clean energy that we're going to need. At some point in time, the well is going to run dry and the natural gas and the oil are going to come to an end. And so it'll be one of my jobs to get out there and convince them that we do need green energy. We need to start allowing that infrastructure to come in, but at the same time, be able to convey the message that we're going to protect their neighborhoods, that we're not going to put it by schools, because that's one of the issues right now down in Gillespie County and Fredericksburg. They do have a BESS, which is a battery energy storage site, and they're fighting that. So I've got to let them know that instead of using lithium ion batteries, we could use sodium ion. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to push, educate them and let them know that it's not such a bad thing. It's just there's probably an oil company or a gas company out there pushing a message to them and it's getting to those folks. And so it'll be my job to get out there and just educate them and bring in the experts and be an elected official who's going to be present to allow these conversations to take place.
Thank you very much, Javi. I appreciate it. So now we'll switch back to federal questions. And Milah, you are up next, ma'am. And this question will be on affordability. With inflation and housing costs remaining a top concern for Texans in 2026, what specific federal legislation would you champion to provide immediate relief to middle and low-income families in your district? Need to unmute. Sorry.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better. Okay, 2 minutes now. Starting now.
There we go. Okay, I got it.
Go
I'm
for
so
it.
sorry, guys. Zoom. Okay. So affordability. So the very first thing I would do in regards to affordability is I would expand the child tax credit for immediate family relief. We are raising kids. I have currently 3 teenagers, 1 girl and two teenage boys right now. And I am telling you, the prices have just gone up. They've skyrocketed. One example I like to use is we go quarterly to Sam's Club. We did our January quarterly last month, and when we had done our September, it had gone up about $200, and we put the exact same things in the cart. We just get the same things every 3 months. So there definitely is affordability problems. An expanded child tax credit would definitely help with that. The second thing would be to I would probably say invest in affordable housing. That would be the second one. And also offer more first-time home buyer assistance. People aren't buying homes anymore. I know that we bought our home in 2021 and then the market has since then just gone insane. I have friends, who are, having their second and third kids and who are wanting to buy homes and they just they can't afford it. And so we would need to address affordable housing as well. We would need to address supply chain issues to help lower grocery stores. We have issues with that. We would need to, of course, encourage our farmers and who are working in our vegetation and with our crops and our vegetation. Excuse me, here I lost my train of thought there. To be able to excuse me, I'm just going to move on from that one. I'm so sorry. Somebody just knocked on my door. So the second thing would be, or the third thing would be, raise the federal minimum wage. Mitchell did talk about that a little bit, raising it to $15 an hour. They say that, of course,
10
that
seconds.
high schoolers should be making $7.25. When we look at it, we really need to be looking at pushing it. It should be something that maybe a child can start with, but nobody can afford that. that's what I have there.
Okay, thank you very much, Milah. And now to you, Gordon. Affordability. With inflation and housing costs remaining a top concern for Texans in 2026, what specific federal legislation would you champion to provide immediate relief to middle and low-income families in your district?
And so I talked about this in the beginning during my introduction, right? We need a $15 an hour minimum wage across the board. To Milah's point, that does include all workers. Doesn't matter if you're in high school or if you're working past retirement as your choice. We need a $15 an hour minimum wage. We talked about housing and rent stabilization. We need to ensure that we have programs available for first-time home buyers, and we do need to take a look at rent stabilization. And rent stabilization is not just how do we lower rent for renters, but we also have to protect homeowners that are renting houses as well, right? And all of that gets wrapped around the axle when we bring in corporations like BlackRock that buy up entire city blocks and then sit on those houses until they get the prices that they demand. And because they do that, they drive up property values around the region, and it becomes a snowball problem for working class Americans. I would also say that in order to ensure a living wage for working families, we need to bolster and support our unions, and we need to codify in legislation the right to collective bargaining. Unions have been getting this right since the first automobile assembly line up in Detroit, Michigan, with Ford. Unions are the path to living wages for working class Americans, and we have got to bolster our unions to represent the working class Americans, and we have got to ensure that we have collective bargaining as a viable option, especially in Texas for our teachers and our healthcare workers.
Thank you very much, Gordon. And now for you, Casey, affordability. With inflation and housing costs remaining a top concern for Texans in 2026, what specific federal legislation would you champion to provide immediate relief to middle and low-income families in your district?
First and foremost, we need the Justice Department to actually enforce the antitrust and consumer protection laws we already have. It seems like they only try to step in when it's two media giants like Netflix and Warner Brothers trying to join together, or technology companies. But to break up some of those corporate monopolies that are taking housing, taking farmland, we need the Justice Department to step up and do its job. And that would require congressional oversight, hearings, and basically figuring out where the problems lie in the Trump administration and focusing on those. We also need to focus on consumer protection laws. Again, Justice Department not doing its job. Price gouging, consumer protection in terms of monopolies created and price collusion, and basically pricing things like groceries and utilities and prescription drugs. They have companies will have back alley deals to keep those prices at a certain level, and it's the Justice Department's job to step in those situations and actually enforce the consumer protection and anti-price gouging laws that we have on the books already. All of this would require greater transparency with the Justice Department in terms of its investigations and actions it's taking to help. And as the congressman, I would provide that transparency through congressional hearings, subpoena power, questioning witnesses, those kind of things.
Thank you, Casey. And that wraps up question 3. So we're going to turn to a fourth question, and Milah, you get the fun of the first response. And this is on a woman's right to choose. Milah, how would you work to restore nationally a woman's right to choose her own reproductive options?
Yes, this one is near and dear to my heart too. Just a 20-second story here. There was a point when my husband was deployed, and during his deployment, about 3 months in, we had lost a baby at almost 5 months pregnant. He was able to come home for a few days after the deployment. It was a surprise pregnancy, but we were pretty devastated. He was home for about 10 days and had to go back overseas. We had decided together as a couple at that point, I wanted to have my tubes tied. I went to the clinic to get it done. They said I had to wait until my husband got home because it needed to be a decision we made together. Mind you, this is after I'd already had 4 children. So I understand being told I do not have autonomy over my own body. We definitely need to go back and we need to codify Roe's protection into federal law. The fact it was actually abolished after we bought our home here. And it was just, we were so sad. I remember me and my 17-year-old daughter, kind of upset. And she's like, Mom, what's that mean? And I said, what it means is we're going to have to fight. I would also repeal federal restrictions that limit abortion access. Obviously, right now we're in Texas. And so we do see that, women are being penalized for trying to have an abortion, or a doctor will be penalized. Women are taking their themselves or their children or their friends and other family members out of state to have things done. So I would make sure that was protected for women, and I would protect doctors and patients from criminal penalties. That it just shouldn't be happening. I believe was it Mississippi? I don't remember which state it was. I read something today that said they're making it legal now for the death penalty for women who've had abortions. I want to look more into that and find out what all that entails. But from the get-go, it's horrible. But we just need to ensure that women can make healthcare decisions without the government being involved or interfering whatsoever.
Thank you very much, Milah. And the question will now go to Gordon. Gordon, on a woman's right to choose, how will you work to restore nationally a woman's right to choose her own reproductive options?
So I would start off by saying that there's not enough room in an exam room for a woman, her care provider, and the federal government. So one of those 3 entities have got to get out of the room, and that is the federal government. My partner is in public health and women's health in Williamson County. I am 2 classes away from completing my public health master's at Johns Hopkins University. This is an issue that is a kitchen table issue in our family daily. We have got to actually go back and recodify Roe v. Wade, right? We were asleep at the wheel when we let that fall, and the downstream effects are now they're coming after contraception. Now they're coming after prophylactic treatments like PEP and PrEP. Where does it stop? So we have got to be intentional in protecting women's health care, and it's not just limited to abortion. It is a woman's right to bodily autonomy. It is also every American's right to bodily autonomy. And so I think we do a disservice to this discussion when we separate out specific women's rights. But we have to be intentional in setting a federal floor that says that a woman's health care is between her and her provider. That is the minimum. And I said this before, we have to take the federal government out of those decisions. We also have to eliminate the conglomerate's ability to regulate these types of decisions through their control over insurance practices and pharmaceutical pipelines, right? So it's not just the legislative piece. We have to get corporations out of that game as well.
Thank you very much, Gordon. And now we'll turn to you, Casey, to also discuss a woman's right to choose. How will you work to restore nationally a woman's right to choose her own reproductive options?
Codifying Roe v. Wade is a good step. The problem is that when the court overturned Roe v. Wade, what they found is specifically that there is no inherent right to privacy in the Constitution. So ultimately, I think in Roe v. Wade and a lot of other decisions, we would need to have a constitutional amendment, just like the California Constitution has a right to privacy. We need to write that into the federal Constitution as well. But I would say even without that amendment, codifying Roe v. Wade is a very good first step, and at least we would get to challenge the issue in court and argue for a right to privacy that hasn't previously been recognized. In the interim, we can expand federal privacy protections. So not just get the government out of the medical room, but get them out of the medical records room, get them out of the medical monitoring of certain medical supplies. And that would protect women who would want to travel to other states. It would shield the patients and providers and allow them to make whatever the decisions they want to make privately without state interference. And then I would say all of that can be part of a larger initiative to increase federal support funding for reproductive health education, actual evidence-based education that would allow people to understand the issue as a medical decision, not as a moral decision.
Thank you very much, Casey. Appreciate it. And unfortunately, women's reproductive health is an issue in the state level here, not only in Washington. So Javi, I'm going to ask you about women's reproductive health. Slightly different question, but very similar. Most Texans oppose a total abortion ban, and more than 80% support exceptions for rape, incest, and the health of the mother. How would you navigate a Republican-controlled legislature to restore those protections?
Yeah, good point, Mike, because at the end of the day, if we can't get the votes to get enough Democrats there in office to fight against this, it's going to be very difficult to navigate. So my main thing is whoever you know, get out there, grab them, tell them they got to vote. Because if we don't win, you've seen how Texas has controlled, the legislation. Democrats don't have a voice. I've talked to a lot of these elected officials. They can't say anything. They can't do anything. So we definitely got to get out there, change the vote. But to echo what a lot of these folks have said here, these other candidates, I have no place to tell or no right to tell a woman what she's got to do with her body. It's just not my place. That's a conversation between her family, her significant other. They will have that conversation on how to proceed with any medical procedures. So it's something that I'm definitely going to get in there. Like I said, we've got to get enough votes to get the Democrats in there to fight that, show our support towards these women to allow them to make decisions on their bodies where we're not trying to dictate what they have to do.
Thank you very much, Javi. Okay, and I believe that wraps up question 4. Yeah, so I think we can squeeze in another question or so. So we're going to turn back to some federal questions, and I'm going to ask Gordon Mitchell to respond on immigration. Very short question. How would you reform ICE and CBP?
And so I've talked about this at length. First, I want to say that I think the reason that we have so many veterans running for these offices is because so many of us have been sent other places to put a stop to the things that we're seeing occurring in our streets here in America today. And that lies at the feet of the Trump administration. Never in my life would I have thought that we would see masked and unidentified agents taking our people off the street without due process. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, we now see our American citizens being summarily executed in the streets. That falls with DHS and ICE. And I have said this before, and I'll say it again. We need to eliminate ICE and the DHS. We need to replace it with the Department of Immigration, Naturalization, and Refugee Services. Not only that, this agency must be compassionate care and trauma informed. It is ludicrous to think that we want people that want to seek a better life in America to go to an office that they know they will be handcuffed and sent to God knows where. We have got to make that process accessible, and we have to make it not terrifying for those seeking a better life in America. Let's bring them in. Let's get some fingerprints. Let's do our cursory background check to the greatest extent possible, issue a tax identification number, and then say, hey, we will see you in 90 days, every 90 days for the
10
next.
seconds.
And that 90 days is not to see what they're doing wrong, but to see how our immigration system is helping them assimilate into American society. We have got to do away with ICE and DHS and replace it with something that is rooted in human dignity.
Thank you very much, Gordon. And Casey, I want to ask you the same question on immigration. How would you reform ICE and CBP?
I would just get rid of ICE. It's less than 20 years old, and the stigma of ICE is already overcomes any benefit it would we would have in reforming it. As far as the genuine functions of ICE, the CBP could take those over quite easily. We would need oversight, congressional, and just transparency so that the public knows what's going on, strengthening reporting requirements, body cameras, clearly marked vehicles, all the things we expect from regular law enforcement, we should expect from Customs and Border Patrol agents as well. And of course, they would need to focus on the actual security threats and not try to engage in a law enforcement function. ICE is, or ICBD in place of ICE they would be tasked with actually securing our borders and securing our safety and not going into American cities and knocking down doors. And the last thing I think is we need to reform our immigration process. One way I've always thought would be very easy if we worked with our partner Mexico to build an asylum processing center at their southern border so we could process the asylum claims of everyone coming up from South and Central America. We could save both countries quite a bit of money and inhumane treatment, basically, of these people.
10 seconds.
And just make the immigration process more efficient. Work visas, those type of things that would asylum processing, modernizing ports of entry, all of those type of things. If we modernize the immigration system, we would have there would be a lot less room for inhumane treatment and human rights abuses.
Thank you very much, Casey. Let's shift to state issues. A different question for Javi on affordable housing. Javi, state leadership has focused on property tax cuts, but rising rents and insurance premiums are squeezing many Texans. How will you provide real relief to renters and low-income homeowners? 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, so first we got to hold the owners of these properties accountable. A lot of them are gouging these citizens. They're raising their prices to these ridiculous amounts. And we've got to protect our folks. We've got young families, we've got college students who can't afford to buy a house or even pay their rent. They're living back at home with their parents. I hear this all the time. And comfort, it's another one of those issues where you have people that are in the community, have been there for the long haul, Leonard was coming in to build a 1,000 home development. And once again, they decided that they didn't want that there. But there were young families who were hopeful for these homes. They thought they were going to get a chance and an opportunity to live that American dream, to get a house. And it has been stopped. The county commissioner and them have stopped it. Leonard's no longer building a home. And once again, it's getting out there and educating them and letting them know that, hey, there's other families, there's young families, there's college students. They want to live that American dream too of owning their own home. I think one of the hardest things that I heard was when the commissioner who had moved to that community when he was in the third grade, that's how he opened up his speech. But later on within his talk, he tells them we've got to stop people from moving in. So I had to scratch my head and say, how can you even say those words when you at one point in time moved into this community? So we've definitely got to, like I said, educate them, let them know that these families are coming in, and we're gonna make it work. Obviously, if the resources get too far, too tapped, then we'll have to sit down and look at long business impact analysis and home building analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Javi. And Milah, you get the last word, I think, on immigration. Milah, how would you reform ICE and CBP, please? Apologies. 2 minutes.
All right. This is actually my wheelhouse. I do have my master's in Homeland Security, and what we see currently happening with the Department of Homeland Security when it comes to ICE is illegal on many levels and just finding loopholes on several other ones. The first thing I would do is abolish ICE in its current form completely. And I would separate criminal investigations such as human trafficking or cartel activity. That would be separated into a dedicated law enforcement division. And we also need to end mass detention of non-violent families. There still is separation of families and children. That shouldn't be happening. That's cruel. That causes lifelong issues. We need to stop doing that. And we need to eliminate private immigration detention centers. They're popping up all over they're huge facilities as well. It makes me wonder if they have bigger ideas than just putting immigrants in there. And I think we could do that. And when we did that, we'd be able to establish strong civil rights oversight and independent accountability to make sure that things were being done legally one way or another. When it comes to CPB, I would say we need to maintain border security, but we still need to prioritize human rights. Sandra had asked a question, you can apply for asylum coming to the border or after you've already entered into America, and it doesn't matter how you entered into America, into the United States of America, you have a right to apply for asylum. And so that's what it should be there for. We also need to require, even at the border, body cameras, not just for ICE, but also at the border as well. And we also need to codify medical and child welfare standards in these holding facilities. Kids aren't being fed, they're getting sick, they're dying. We need to improve processing efficiency at the ports of entry as well. It's taking too long, they're getting backlogged. We can do better. There's a lot we can do. I wish I had more time to talk about this subject.
Thank you very much, Milah. And thanks to everyone for participating. Let me share my screen here. Yeah, I want to thank all four of you. These four people are patriotic Texans and Americans who want to actually help regular Texans, unlike the other guys. So if everyone